What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Sunday Sessions, man, during our summer sabbatical series. So glad to have you with us today. My name is Darante LaMar, and I'm absolutely honored that you've decided to share your time with us on this weekend, man. I am a champion for community as a service, so I kind of craft these conversations every week as a weekly community touch point for those who are in the process of either or not only deconstructing their beliefs, but reconstructing their lives and ultimately our shared world. If this is your first time here, please make sure to let us know where you're watching from. And don't leave this weekend until you've met a friend in the chat. And to learn more about DLDD World Group, Bridge City Global, or Windows Shop, check out the links in the descriptions. It's so glad to see so many of you already active in the chat. I got a few announcements before we jump into our main conversation today. Let me go ahead and share my screen here so some of y'all can see this. I think I'll take me off. We got NanoCon coming up. It's coming up on July the 25th through the 27th, I believe. July the 26th, all weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's going to be incredible. Seth Andrews is going to be down there, or up there, rather. It's north for me. Candace Gorham, April LaJoy, Dan Barker, Arden Hart, Dr. Darrell Ray, and then that guy, he's going to be there too. I think that's me. And then Glenda, and I've had a chance to meet many of them. And of course, Dr. Darrell Ray will be with us next weekend. So please, if you're in that area or if you're planning to go, please make sure that I get to see you, that I get to meet you in person. And then also, if you didn't know about it, now you do, and you know that I'll be in the area. Speaking of, that same weekend, we'll be doing our next monthly community hangout, which we just launched last week. Let me see if I can put that bad boy on the screen. And I have. That is Friday, July the 25th. So I'll be just getting into Nashville. I'll be going straight to my room and then pulling up my computer and jumping into the call with our community. So if you're a patron, a YouTube member, if you are a window shopper or a Bridge City grad, you'll get that special invite link, and you still got some time to get in where you fit in either of those ways. All right, let me see. What else do I have? Patron Travel Club. I think I can put me back on the screen now. Let me move this. Put me back up here. Well, don't see me. There we go. So now that I'm back on the screen, Patron Travel Club. The requests are coming, man. We have a growing hub of supporters all over, and people are really wanting in-person engagement, in-person meetings, in-person workshops, activities, whatever. And we want to be able to meet that. So if you want to be able to support traveling, if you want to be able to support me getting to more spaces, we've opened up a new tier on Patreon. It's a $15 tier, but you can upgrade it to give as much or however you want to do that. But if you want to support me traveling, like right now, we have a growing hub in South California. I got to get there. I got to get there with this hub. And to show you what I'm talking about, I'm going to share my screen one more again, as they used to say in the old church, one more again. I'm going to share my screen one more again, just to show you what I mean when I say these hubs. Now, this is where I'm located. Actually, I'm located closer up this way. But this is where I'm located. And this is basically where this little community movement started at, with me in my little garage. But over the past year and a half, we've had pins to kind of spread all over the Southeast. But like, it hasn't stopped there. And so like this is what the North American continent looks like right now. And just to kind of show you what I'm talking about in Southern California, so y'all see that we're not exaggerating. This is Northern California. This is mid-California. We got one little pin in mid-California. I don't know who that is, but thank you for holding out, soldier. We love you. And then we got this huge cluster right here in Southern California. And not only do we have this cluster of pins, most of them are faceless. We also have people in that area who've stepped up to say, like, I want to host events here. I want to do things. I want to get things started. So I'm really excited about getting to that area. All right, and I'm going to get ready to close this, but I'll just go ahead and show you what that impact and what that growing footprint is looking like from a global perspective. Like, isn't that, like, this is insane. Like when we got started last year, excuse me, this is definitely not how I saw things going, but I'm so grateful for this time. So again, if you want to be a part of that travel club, check out, or if you want to support the travel arrangements, check out that travel club tier on Patreon. And now let's see if I can get me back on there. All right. So, are y'all ready for today's conversation, man? Dr. Bird has literally become a channel favorite, and we've only had her on once. And so, I don't even know how we can come even behind the first conversation we did, which I think right now is the highest viewed Sunday session we've had. So that is just absolutely incredible. So we're excited. If y'all can show your love in the chat for Dr. Bird as I bring her back on the screen, and let's see if I can get this right this time.
Hey there.
Man, I am so glad to have you back with us. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, first of all, and I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm got some Paul projects actually in the works. So I think I mentioned that to you last time, and that's why this was the topic, I think. I don't know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I'm doing a little dance that people that, you know, who are following you appreciate some of what I'm bringing. So that's great. That's great.
I love that. I love that. Well, we can kind of jump right in because our audience knows you. And then, of course, at the end, I'm going to allow you to get the floor to just kind of tell us anything you got going on that's exciting. But I did get a question that wasn't in the notes that I sent you. We have people that go through a course for one of our organizations called Brick City Global. And our graduates of that course get to send in questions in our alumni study hall. And so we got, two questions from one person. And I just saw them this morning, so I added them this morning to my notes, but I didn't get to add them to yours. So you let us know if it's in your wheelhouse or not, and we'll take it from there. But the question is, as it relates to historical, as it relates to the historical evolution of Christianity, what was the first Christian denomination to reject a literal interpretation of Jesus, a belief that Paul persuaded so many to adopt?
Oh, wow.
That's it. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that question first? Yeah, because I
no, go ahead. You had a follow up to that.
Yeah, because I know my immediate thoughts, a belief that Paul persuaded many to adopt, especially with the literal the literal adaptation or the literal interpretation. Would you say that Paul persuaded people to see a literal Jesus?
Okay, so the video I'm working on right now on Paul, I have this hair hanging down. It's driving me crazy. Okay. It is looking at the religious the ideas from other religious traditions that Paul drew upon to talk about Jesus as the Christ. So my response to this question is, I don't quite think of it in that way. Right?
Ooh, yeah.
Okay. So I think that our modern conceptions around, you know, Jesus is still here. I have a relationship with Jesus, you know, what people say, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Jesus was a man who really lived and died for me and all that stuff. And he is Jesus the Christ. Like, modern day people tend to not understand the difference between Jesus and Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a really important, like, kind of foundational piece to understand, because of its importance in the first century and why that would be different than the way we think about it. So saying the literal Jesus doesn't actually matter in the first century. Because what Paul is doing is he's taking the image, the reality of an executed Jewish man who was, you know, arrested, taken captive in the middle of the night and sham trial, all that, right?
Yeah.
Things that we can still relate to and we know happen. That person, what got him arrested, what got him executed, does not matter to Paul. Paul is doing a thing, right? He's taking the idea of a person put to death and then putting on all the ideas of the risen, the ideas around resurrection and all that stuff. So it's like the guy Jesus is a placeholder for all the Christ things that Paul does. Paul doesn't care about the life that Jesus lived. It doesn't matter at all in anything Paul wrote, genuine Paul or Deutero. It doesn't, like, Jesus's life is irrelevant. The thing that got him killed is irrelevant. And I want to tell you, that's the most important part to me, is the life that we talk about him living and why he got arrested, why he was executed, because he was standing up for social justice. So like,
Wow.
so what did Paul try to get people to believe in? Like this whole realm of deification. And he got people to see this guy's death and the implication of a resurrection through all of the lenses that all these other Greek and Roman religious traditions had. So he's playing with
Ooh, come on.
ideas.
Yes.
It didn't matter if there was a real person behind it all, even for Paul.
Come on. Okay. That's so good, because in my book, Christ Held Up, I hit on the outskirts of this, and that wasn't even meant to be an academic pursuit. It was just really more me sharing some of my theological questions that I had when I was still a believer. But one of the things that I highlighted in that book is that there is a sincere difference between a Jewish Messiah and a Greek Christ. And that's where a lot of misinterpretation comes from. But I didn't even think to go ahead and take it that one step further and say, well, there could also be a difference between a Jewish Messiah, a Jewish Jesus, and a Greek Christ. And so like that is, oh snap.
Yeah.
That has my mind going now.
Good. Yeah.
That makes more sense. Okay.
Does
See,
it?
like,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
because it definitely gives me something else to look at. Because from a purely theological practitioner's perspective, as a pastor, my whole interpretation of Jesus was through the Gospels, the history of Jesus, who he is, what he does. The whole narrative is defined and confined to the Gospels. I didn't really in those days go to history to find out who is this historical person. And so now, like, oh shit, that's something I want to do now. That's like, oh man, that's good. Oh man. Because the one thing, like, I can look at the scripture now and say, this guy in scripture, I don't know who this is. This is crazy. But on an academic side, I am now very interested in knowing who the man was. If there's a man at the center of this legend, I want that story, man. That's exciting.
And I think that's very much up for debate, right? I mean, there are people all over the place on that, and and people both who have faith commitments that they need him to be real, but also faith commitments who are okay with him not being they're not being a person we trace back to. I find it really interesting. This is a total segue, but like Bart Ehrman seems to think there really was a guy, and
yes, he does.
And I think there's something to that. Like it happened, right? This happened to Jewish people, under these in these regimes. So we know that it's realistic to say that this happened to a guy. It's realistic to say
absolutely
that a Jewish man was behaving according to the Hebrew Bible prophets before him, right? And raging against social injustice. And, like there are elements there to me that make sense, but I am not going to say I really believe there is one person that we're tracing it all back to, because I don't find that helpful. And I find that kind of certainty disturbing.
Yeah. Ooh,
do you know what I mean?
My goodness. Yes. That's always been somewhat of a concern of mine, even when I was still a believer.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is why, it was why it was really hard for me to lock into a doctrinal certainty. So I never identified as a Calvinist. I never identified really as any of those things, because I'm like, I don't know where you're pulling that certainty from. I would like to know, and I would like to pull it there, pull it from there too. But for me now, if we're saying it has to be on faith, then we can't be claiming certainty at the same time. And that was just kind of my relationship with faith, which kept me on the outskirts for a while, because people were like, this dude is weird. But it's how I view things. I still view things that way. And now I give myself even more permission to do so. So even when Dr. Bart has mentioned it a few times, I've been very interested to why do we need this? And so I've gone as far to describe myself as an apathist. I'm not a mythicist. I'm not a historicist. I'm an apathist. If he didn't rise from the dead and wasn't actually the son of a god, then I don't care that much. But now, just something you just said made me like, dang, maybe I'm a different type of I'm a curious apathist now, because I don't actually care for the story of Christianity per se. I don't care for the theological perspective, but just, man, if there is a prototype or archetype or even just a moment in history, in Jewish history, where there were several people who that these stories get traced on, like now I feel like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like that's a story worth digging up. But other than that, no, it has always kind of bothered me where people imply certainty where certainty can't necessarily exist yet.
Yeah.
And that's a slippery slope, because I think we can all do it in some areas. As an atheist, I do it sometimes because I call myself a hard atheist with a hard A. So I do put myself sometimes where I will say, like, no, I know for a fact there is no God. Now, I typically give the caveat that I'm talking about this human concept of God that I can trace sociologically. As a sociologist, I can trace this guy. I can trace his origin. And I mean, just the broad concept, but the idea of something being out there that is a creator or that played any role in any universal creation, I have no way to make any certain claims about that. And I wouldn't really waste my time trying to.
That's it, right? There's so much, there's so little time here. Why are we, but I agree. I totally agree.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna hit the second part of his question. Who knew that one was gonna open up such a can of worms, right? That was supposed to be a Paul question, and it got us to Jesus,
Well, but that's ultimately the thing, that the rub here, right?
Yes.
People trying to understand Paul do it putting the gospels first, and then they think that Paul came, and no, Paul came first.
That's right.
Paul's ideas about this guy, Jesus, as the Christ, came first, and then the gospels were written. And so, and that the gospel, that his ideas about this Christ do not talk about his life is really important. It's a really important detail.
Man, that is... like I can remember the first time realizing that that Paul's letters were first, and just like the extreme discomfort that gave me.
Right, me too.
It was like, what? That can't be right. Like, how does that happen?
Yes, so many times it felt like the rug being pulled out. Right, you're like, what? That too?
Like, what else is there, man?
Exactly. What else are you going to take from me?
I think in one of my most recent studies, I was just like, dang, was any of these people real? I don't know.
Exactly. And see, that's the thing.
I was trying to, yes, go ahead.
Well, no, but that, to the person's question, that's a difference between the way we're trying to navigate life today and the way that we can presume that people were navigating it then. The line between real and imagined, I think it's blurred. It wasn't as distinct. And we see that in all kinds of things in the ancient world, in terms of the line between human and God. Very blurry, very blurry. Like the depictions of the divine. Whoa, they look like humans. Go figure, right? Right. And so the idea of a Christ is pulling on ideas that people had that help them make sense of the world. And so that is what matters. What matters is that the ideas worked. They helped people, right? They passed them along, blah, blah, blah. It's spiritualized message that anyone can get behind. All kinds of reasons why Paul's ideas, were embraced to a certain degree. Anyway, so.
But, I love that, because and I'll get to his next question in a few, but this has just been great. I love that, because when I think about history, and it's really hard, because we want to make history linear, and I know it's not.
Right.
But when I when I think about history, especially trying to explore religion and our relationship with it, dating all the way back to animism and totemism in some of our earliest days, with these concepts, and watching them, while sure some of them, like these concepts don't disappear, they don't go away, but we can kind of see new ideas emerge, and through that we can almost track a trajectory of sociological evolution with religion. So like in those earliest days, we see religion as something, or not even religion, let me pull that back, we see the divine as something primordial, something beyond anything that can be described, anything that can be actually crafted into anything. But eventually we get comfortable crafting things, but the concept is still so big that we have to craft several things into things. And like we see that ancient totemism where you have the eagle and the lion and the buffalo, and then maybe a man somewhere in there, or a woman somewhere in there. And then even when we see somewhat prehistoric religions such as the ancient Egyptian religions, we still see that same form of totemism. It's just now becoming more anthropomorphized.
Right.
So now the totems can walk, and now they have hands. And then by the time we get to this turn of the century, where we see this Christian ideology coming up, which is not just coming up there, but there are other places that are getting these types of ideologies. Like, well, the first time on this scene around this time, people are being able to see the divine as human, just completely anthro-human, which was something somewhat new.
Okay, I don't agree with that.
Oh, Cole, please talk to me. Yes.
The divine as human is something that I think definitely predates Christian ideologies.
Okay. Yes, for sure. For sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So maybe I misunderstood what you're saying.
I'm saying around the time in several different cultures that there were this ideology of God and man coming together was something that seemed to be popular around that time.
But I think it long predates, not just a couple hundred years.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that the idea, like Mithras, for instance, who parallels, there's just a lot drawn from Mithras by
Absolutely.
Paul, right? Paul pulled a lot from Mithras, but also from the Egyptian goddess Isis. But
yes.
Mithras is depicted as being born, right, from an egg or out of a rock, and this is a god, but a human. Right.
Yeah.
So, and he dates back 1500 years BCE. Right. So I think this is one of the things I kept mulling over is, goodness, I grew up in a Christian church. And so my understanding of the, divine, whatever, is monotheistic. And, these others happen to exist as well. No.
Right.
The polytheism is dominant. And I know that, but sitting with the ideas that I've been sitting with to prepare for this video, the other video I'm creating, it shifts things when you steep in it for a while.
Yes.
Right? This is 2,000 years prior to Jesus and Paul. People are all over the place with their ideas and their, what they're ascribing to deity. And so it just makes it more, I don't know, human or something to say this, these the things that were happening within Christianity, that within Judaism of the first century that also played into Christianity. It wasn't new. And they weren't the ones coming up with it. And it had been around a long time prior to that. Right. These female gods, okay. All right, let's sit down. Let's have a chat.
For sure. Yes. Well, I think that's one of the things that I really appreciated about, especially the ancient Egyptian pantheons of gods, is that there always seemed to be this duality. And so while some knew of Amun, but there's also Amunet, while some, there's always this male and this female counterpart. And when I first saw that, when I was first learning that, I was like, why couldn't my religion be like that? That just seems to be a healthier worldview.
Right. Right. There's balance or something, Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So sorry.
His second question is, no, this is, I love this. It's not just that I love this, and I hope audience, I hope y'all are enjoying this. I need this type of conversation I be craving. He says, I am also curious as to what really drove Paul beyond his perceived delusional, possible hallucinogenic or psychosomatic, supernatural and or superstitious experience on the road to Damascus. So he wants to know what really drove Paul. Is it really this Damascus event that's kind of defined in Acts, or is there something else behind Paul that we're not really seeing?
I love the question. Because so many people are taught to think of the whole development of the early, like the early movement, the early church. Okay, let me just call it that for now, through the lens of the book of Acts. And the book of Acts is a bunch of BS.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is. It's a bunch of BS. Oh gosh, for a couple reasons. One is it is so, oh gosh, there's so many reasons. Okay, it is negative about any of the Jewish traditions that aren't on board with worshiping Jesus as the Messiah. So because of that, even though it's within a Jewish context and Christianity hasn't branched off yet to be its own thing, so it's still within Judaism, but it's still anti-Jewish if you're not thinking the right thing within Judaism, which
Wow.
is most of the Jews, right? So the sect of Judaism that's worshiping Jesus as the Messiah is not all of Judaism. It is a small portion of it. So the narrative of Acts is pro-Jesus as Messiah. And if you're not on board, you are being demonized almost every other page, right?
Yes.
So there's that. There's the fact that Peter is shown as the leader, which Peter and Paul, in Paul's letters, they were antagonistic to each other. Paul tells us that he got up in Peter's face in public.
That's in Galatians. Yes.
Right, exactly. No. And it was Paul's ideas that brought the Gentiles in. Wow. I will go to my grave on that one. Yep. It is not Jesus's disciples that created Christianity. No, it is not.
Right.
The segment of Judaism that brought in Gentiles was Paul's effort, and he was going all over the empire, right? He was traveling. He was doing if we're going to posit the guy Jesus with disciples, right? In whatever part of it's just a little part of the world. They're not traveling all over. They're not taking propaganda. They don't take in road trips, right?
Right. Yes.
And this is jumping to one of your other questions. They are defending traditional ideas around Judaism, and Paul is flaunting them, right? They're saying, no, if you're going to be a part of this community that this Jewish thing, you're going to circumcise the dudes. And this is a major thing for Paul. It shows up so many times in his writings. And so he is flaunting that. That is one of the most central things. Yes. Like Genesis 17, it doesn't get much earlier than that, right? This is non-negotiable. Wow. And Paul says, it's very negotiable, right? Paul's ideas are what bring the Gentiles in. And the book of Acts depicts Peter as the one representing the mission right out of the gate. No, that's just not historically possible. It's not possible. But Christians have been told to read that narrative as literal and as exactly what happened. And these guys are right out of the gate, speaking long speeches that actually reflect many decades of development of thought. Yeah. Not something that would have been said right away, and not something that Peter was up for saying ever, according to the letters of Paul, right? Yes. So there's so many things about the book of Acts that really disturb me. And I think I lost track of. So when it comes to Paul, the road of Damascus, right? Road to Damascus moment. And I'm sure you know this, Darante, because I saw it in one of the questions, and like in Paul's own letter, right? Mm-hmm. Let's just put out there again also, when Paul was writing letters, he wasn't necessarily the one writing them. He was doing them in conjunction with some letter writing buddies, right? So he didn't necessarily write by himself the book of Galatians, but he was collectively writing the book of Galatians.
Interesting. Yes.
Right. And so in Galatians, when he talks about this moment, he talks about that God revealed his son in him. Yeah. Not to him, but in him. And most English translations say to him, because that reflects the narrative from Acts, that there was a voice external, right? Speaking. But Galatians says he had some sort of internal thing happen. And then he went off into the desert to think about it for a while. That's what Paul says. And it may not be absolutely true specifically, but that way more, like, come on. The Damascus Road
that sounds like
visionary. Yeah.
What you just explained is what Steve Jobs did before he started, like that sounds like a startup founder moment.
That's how it works, folks, right? People get an idea, they go off and figure out how to make it work. Yeah. Right? I mean, Paul pulled together some pretty random passages from the Hebrew Bible to make his ideas work.
He did, yes.
He did. We can retrospectively look at what he did and say, I see what he did there. But coming to it initially, that was some creative, crafty stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so I don't give the road of Damascus any weight whatsoever.
Yep. Wow.
But the thing, but it has become popular. It became popular in particular because of the way Augustine wrote about his own experiences. And Augustine in the 4th, 5th century talked about a conversion kind of a moment.
Wow.
And that is why people focus on the conversion moment, want to champion it.
Yep.
And by the way, it's told 3 different times and slightly different details each time. If you want to get down to the like, no, but it had, no. Yeah, well, it's a story. Just like Paul taking ideas of this Jewish man who's executed and borrowing all these other religious ideas to create an idea, to create a framework, to create something for people to hold on to and believe. It's the same thing. That's what they're doing in the book of Acts. But it's heavily negative toward Jews who are not on board with worshiping Jesus as the Messiah. And that is the most troubling thing to me about the book. In addition to all the other things.
I did not right?
Go ahead.
I did not include Acts in my Christ Held Up book, but I did include that I did notice that the Gospels could be seen as a way to be negatizing a lot of Jewish customs, and that was something that I would have never allowed myself to see when I was still proactively in it.
Yes,
but it became very clear to me. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to see the Pharisees, the Sadducees, like in the context of the churches I was a part of. If you were called a Pharisee, that was equivalent with being called a hypocrite. If you were called a Sadducee, that is equivalent with being called a hypocrite.
That's right.
And it took me years to realize, like, that's actually keeping me from understanding what these systems were, who these people were, and how they operated.
That's right. And it kept you from humanizing them, empathizing on any kind of level, right?
Yes.
Understanding.
Yes. Oh my
They could be written off as those.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally, many of the churches I was a part of had adopted replacement theology, that Christians replaced the Jews. That's what we're here for, you know.
That's an honest read, by the way. That's an honest read. Yeah.
You're not wrong. God,
I mean, I don't want to. That's the part of the problem.
Yes,
these traditions that do that have really ancient fodder to build upon for that. That's what's so troubling.
It is. Well, like, I remember even me, you know, on my way out, I started trying to get a better understanding of the church fathers, because I think if you're in it and you want a pure relationship with your faith, you know, and so you want to go back and how did they do it in the early days? And then so I got the list of all these church fathers, Ignatius and all these other things, and I'm reading them and I'm like, this and it took me a while to get to Ignatius. I think I may have started with like some of the writings of Marcus Aurelius or something like that.
Okay.
I can't remember the first one I read by him.
Yeah, Roman.
Yeah, but I think he was talking about the kingdom of God or something. It was something, and I was just like, all right, this is okay. I wasn't into philosophy yet. I thought that philosophy was demonic, so I still needed to go back a little further. And so I kept going back, but the more and more I was going back, the further and further I was going back, it didn't feel like narratives. It felt like recreations. It felt like retellings. And it was just, there were just certain schemas that kind of appeared over and over again.
So sharp.
Kind of like what you just mentioned about the conversion, what Augustine is talking about. You start realizing these things are like, they're patternistic, and life, you know, doesn't really happen that way. Like, everybody doesn't get crucified the same way. Now, you know, like, don't go through this, you know, like, wow. And so after a while, it started feeling like, to me, and I kind of walked away from it for a while. Just within the past few years, I've started getting back into that study, but I walked away from it for a while because it started to feel like, it started to look like to me that these were people who could have possibly been shaping narratives to legitimize themselves to create histories. And I couldn't figure out where this, because we do it, I think almost every culture does it when building our own histories. We start with this type of primordial fiction where there's these legendary characters.
Yes, legendary that just did nothing wrong, right? Their shit doesn't stink, right? Like
Yes.
Right.
And so everybody wants to identify with them. You know, that's how you get the temple cults. You know, this is the temple of Athena, temple of, because this is the badass that I like, you know?
I mean, and we even see it in the Hebrew Bible, because the story of David is just like what turned into rating PG. in
Yes.
the Book of Chronicles. All the stuff that he did that was really nasty, abusing power, manipulating people, taking advantage, raping,
Oh, yeah.
all those things that he did, all gone, right?
Yes.
Propaganda. It's powerful. We want our king, our hero, to be,
Wow.
above reproach.
Man.
And he's not.
Yeah. Nope.
Nobody is,
Nope. Nobody is. Even Jesus, when I was just kind of reading his story, I remember just not early on. This was probably after 2014, so it was a little bit after I deconstructed. But I was thinking that the way Jesus' story is told, or at least the way it's presented, I don't even know if this is patternistic to the Bible itself, or if this is something that Protestants have kind of done with our retelling of the story. But we had this, it's almost like this parallel of he's 0 to 12, or he's 0, then he's 12, and then he's 30.
Yeah.
And I noticed in many of the retellings of the Egyptian king histories, they use that same schema.
Yeah. And
Yes.
and why, right? Like when you look at ancient biographies, why were they doing that? They're talking about like moments in the life that help show us who they are at their essence, right? And I got that language, the essence language, actually also from Bart Ehrman, but talking about the 4 gospels we're given 4 different essences. They're depicting something different. But yes, you don't need to tell the whole story. You tell, those stories that sometimes we still do this, by the way.
Yes.
You'll tell, right? Do your parents tell stories about you at the age of 4 that behaving kind of similarly to you do now? Like it was all that it was there from the beginning, like that's what ancient biographers are doing. So they're going to tell a moment that helps develop the vision they want you to see. And yeah, so not into trying to tell the whole story. Where were they born and their parents, the social background, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, not that's not their agenda.
Man.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. It does happen in the Gospels. It does happen in ancient world. All kinds of important philosophers, kings, all of them, they get that treatment for the same reason.
And and in an interesting way, and I was actually going to post about this earlier, because when I was a pastor, I was in ministry for 2 decades. Christians hated Bible study. That was like, as far as the ones I knew, like that was, I think every young pastor goes through that, where you're so excited to teach your church the Bible. And then you say on Wednesday night, we're going to open up and start in the Bible, and we're going to go, they don't like that. They stop coming. They're like, no. And so it's
do you know why though? Do you know why people didn't want to study the Bible?
I have a few suspicions. I have a few.
Do you want I'd love to, just because you brought it up. I think it's actually probably relevant to what we're doing here.
Ooh. Well, I know. Okay, so I'm gonna hit this from a few spots.
Okay.
For many of the members of my church, I think for them, their relationship wasn't with the Bible. For them, they knew God before the Bible. The Bible is just the book that everybody bases God on. But by far and large, they really didn't care what it said. They really didn't live by it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Truth be told, they cared more about what I said than what the Bible said, and what I said about the Bible. And so it really seemed like my members, by far and large, like they didn't care about the Bible for real. They really cared more about just having some sense of identity and some sense of belonging and something they can lean on for answers without having to read it. So they believe the Bible got the truth, but they don't want to read it. They just trust that I read it and I'm just going to tell them what's in it.
Too much work.
Which was disheartening. That was then it felt like, and it wasn't just for my fellow believers. I found that out with a lot of my fellow contemporary pastors too. Like when I realized how many pastors, like, you've never even read this thing. Not only have you not read it fully, like it's amazing. Because preaching, it's scripted. When people tell me, a preacher is copying somebody else's sermons, I'm like, dude, that's the whole gig. The whole gig is preaching somebody else's stuff. Did you not know this? Like
the primary documents are 2,000 years old, people.
That's the whole gig. But you
Mm.
know, it amazed me. It broke my heart a little bit, and that is something that led to my disillusionment, because I was always waiting on finding another mentor who was going to be like, "Oh, Dante, here's all the things that you didn't know, like, and this is why it
Oh,
all actually makes
wow.
sense." And then I
Wow.
realized that most other people weren't even holding it to a standard of whether it has to be true.
Huh.
As long as it's still socially accepted, and my family believes this, and that's what it bothered. Okay, I'm letting off some of my issues. It bothered me. Because wait a minute, you say this is the most important belief in your life,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you're not investing any interest in it.
Right.
That's frightening to me. But then it
Yeah.
also, I've been a part of impoverished communities my whole life.
Okay.
It made sense immediately. If the
Mm.
thing that is the most important to you, you're not putting any effort into, you're not putting any interest into, then what's the likelihood that you're putting interest in things that are needful for you, if you're
Wow.
not even doing it for the things that are important
Oh,
for you?
that's interesting. That's a really powerful comment. I'm
Yeah.
gonna mull that one over for a while.
You know,
Because you're so
it was
beat down, you don't have the energy, you don't have the
you
whatever to do it? Is that what you mean?
my assessment has been that I
So
know from
demoralized?
my
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like like you don't see
Right.
your own humanity
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Right.
And part of it is doctrinal, part of it is systemic. You know,
Yeah.
there's this aspect where I have to see myself as a wretch. I have to see myself as a low down, dirty
Yes.
worm. I have to see
Yes.
that there is nothing good within
Oh,
me,
it's just so
and
gross. Yep.
it
Mhm.
it's it at it ends up robbing you of
It
agency.
does.
It
It
robs you of
does.
autonomy,
Yeah.
and that makes it hard to engage in things. So I think
Totally.
some of them have already made up in their mind that I couldn't understand it if I tried.
No.
So that's why I need an interpreter.
Mm.
And that is like it's heart-wrenching, because
Mhm.
like I tell people that's why I started sharing content. I'd been an atheist for 10 years and hadn't really said nothing about it. It
Mhm.
was when it finally dawned on me like that, no, people are struggling because they've internalized some of this
That's right.
stuff
That's
in
right.
very real harmful
Very
ways.
yes,
And
yes,
it's
they
not
believe it.
just robbing them, it's robbing humanity. We're not getting
Mhm.
them. They're not
Mhm.
at the table with
Mhm.
us
That's right.
because we've told them to go sit at the children's table you can't understand. And that's just
Mm.
that's sad to me.
Yeah,
That is
you're
heartbreaking.
it is. Agreed.
Yeah, damn it. Now you got me
I'm
crying.
sorry.
Oh shit. But but
But
that's
it
why we do the work.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Okay. I'm gonna get back right here in a few.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thanks
All
for
right.
that.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you. It's I think it's what we owe to each other at the end of the day. Um, if we know better, then we can share it and we
Mhm.
can help it,
We can help others. Yep. Know
and
better, do
that's what
better.
we do.
Mhm.
That's right.
Mhm. That's right.
I think sometimes we take, this is a lesson I've had to learn with myself. I didn't know I was smart when, I knew I was kind of smart,
Oh,
but I didn't know I was smart. And
okay.
so,
That's interesting because you
right. Yeah. Yeah. I did not. I knew I was a smart ass. You know what I'm saying? But I didn't
okay,
know I was
alright,
smart.
but yeah, but you didn't know you got some things going on.
Yes. But because of that, I often judged other people very harshly. Uh,
Oh, oh, because you thought
this,
you kind of were on the same wavelength and they just weren't
yes.
getting it and like, what's wrong with them?
Yes.
Instead of
Oh my goodness.
because you
That was
didn't
like,
realize there was a gap.
I did not realize that there, like, at
No
all.
judgment, but yeah, there's a gap, and yeah.
I
Oh.
had to learn how to appreciate that about myself first.
Yeah,
And
right.
then I had to like learn like, oh shit. I had to start figuring out like, why is there this
Yeah.
gap?
Yeah.
Because I talk to people all the time that I feel like we have this gap with, and they're not what people would say are slow. They're
Right.
not unable to think. They're not unable to engage. And so that's what kind of led to that type of thinking for me, is trying to figure out what is it that's keeping people from doing certain things.
Yes.
What is it that's keeping people from operating in their own best interest? That was
That's
my question that kind of led me down that path,
Mhm, mhm.
Oh
Yep.
my goodness. Okay, so I'm gonna stop crying. I'm gonna get to one of these questions that we actually plan to ask. This happened last week. With Forrest too. Like I had Forrest Valkai on, and I don't think we got to any of our questions, but I love it. This has been amazing. Okay, so let me see here. I got one. We're gonna get some academic stuff in here, y'all. We're gonna get something.
We've had plenty of academic stuff in here, by the way.
Yeah,
it's just just presenting it We're just presenting it in a way that people can understand.
And like, okay, see, now you're gonna give me another rabbit trail. That was a major barrier for me. Like, and that's what I love about scholars like you and what you bring to this table.
Thank you.
I used to have a saying that education doesn't necessarily take place in classrooms. It takes place in conversations. That's where education lives
well
at.
Said.
Yes,
well.
And that's what I love, just being able to casually talk about it, because I know that was a connect for me in school, both K through 12 and even in undergrad. That was a disconnection for me, because I'm like, I don't know how to make this information conversational. And if I can't talk about it, then I don't really understand it. You know what I'm saying? Because articulation is the product of understanding. And I need to be able to have some conversations about it.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, that's why in seminary, we had these things called precepts. It's like, oh yeah, you're hearing all this lecture 2 hours a week, and then third hour of the week, you got to talk about it yourselves, or else you're not actually taking it on for yourself. You've just been listening.
Yes.
You've not actually been engaging in the educational process. And
yes.
Yeah.
Which is so important. Like that's what moves you from passive reception.
That's right.
To actively building knowledge.
That's right. Like, I'm totally with you. And yes, education minded here. Yeah. You have to. Yeah, you can listen all you want to great podcasts, but until you process the information for yourself, internalize it, and think through what it means, nothing's going to change for you.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Oh my goodness. I have a model that I've been working on. I've been lazy on it. I got to get back to it. I was trying to work on a model of how learning actually works in the mind.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to be like too high level, but I was imagining it like almost like marbles in a dish. And each one of those marbles represent just a node point of information, just a random data point. And most of our brains are like perceiving those like a billion marbles a minute, and they're all coming in there. And you get all of those marbles in that dish, but they all have a point of attraction based off of what information they represent.
Okay.
The more marbles you have in that dish that are built around similar knowledge points, or are part of more knowledge categories, the more your confidence tends to increase on that in that category, because you get more friction and more movement between those thoughts. And if you can almost imagine it like learning something for the very first time, and you've never known anything about the subject before. That very first class is just going to feel like a whole bunch of random marbles that somebody just dropped in a dish. And they're not going to have any correlation with each other at all, because there's nothing else in that dish to relate to. But the second day, they're going to pour some more marbles, and maybe 2 or 3 of those marbles say, hey, I think we're kind of alike. And then when that happens, it's like, oh, I know a little bit. The more that happens, those marbles or nodes ends up building structures that strengthen our confidence, not necessarily our accuracy, but definitely strengthens our confidence in the information. And so, and I started working on that just with raising my kids, with realizing, trying to find ways to boost their confidence with information. And the way that I started doing that is, let's figure out, every time you hit a struggle, let's figure out what it is that you don't understand. And then let's put some of those marbles in that dish. Let's put some more marbles in that dish that are more like the things that you don't understand, because then that's what's going to help you understand it. And it's like, athletes have to learn that the hard way, because it's like, you just got to get up there and walk that rope, you've never done it before. Over. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we get to do it the easy way. We get to go play with some information, and I like that. I prefer that way. I don't want to do a backflip for the first time in my life. Don't want to do that. Not interested. Okay. So let me ask this question.
Okay.
This one, yes. What are the primary linguistic, stylistic, and theological markers scholars use to distinguish the 7 undisputed Pauline letters and I don't think I meant to put 7, from the Deutero-Pauline corpus. How do we know who is Paul?
Okay. Well, just to clarify, the 7 is correct. There are 7 undisputed. Yeah. And 6 disputed. Yeah.
6 disputed. Okay.
That's right. Or Deutero-Paul. There are lots of different labels for it. And it's so funny because I was like, oh, maybe I should just turn to my book about that covers the Paul stuff. But I don't think that'll be helpful. So I don't do a whole lot of like nitty gritty stuff like that as very often. So let me paint a broad brushstroke here, right? We can do a comparison between the genuine Paul and the Deutero-Paul, and in the light of what you've just asked. So we could say, for instance, and this is also, there needs to be a caveat. I'm going to remind everyone again, Paul wasn't necessarily the one writing the letters. That he had an amanuensis, we think, for probably all of them. So he was contributing to the conversation. But sorry, this is a little bit of a segue to put some perspective on this.
That's good. That's good. It's context.
Okay. Yeah. Right. When I was able to do just a semester on the Newer Testament, I would have, and we got to the letters of Paul, I would break the classroom up into groups of 4 or 5 students, and I would present like 3 scenarios. And so I'd present each scenario to 2 groups, and they had scenarios that were relevant to their lives. Like, okay, a member of the football team was arrested for drunken in public, blah, 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 over the weekend. What are you going to say as the student body? What are you going to say to the college to explain what's going on, or whatever, or like something about cheating, or like something relevant to them. And I just asked them to write a letter as the student body, or whatever the situation. And then we'd read them. And the two groups addressing the one issue, right, would have a different approach to the same issue. And then I'd ask them, how did you go about deciding who was going to write for your group? Was it someone who just wanted to do it? They're good. They have good handwriting because they were doing it with pens and not with a computer, and then how did you decide what the person wrote? Did the person writing actually did you all dictate to that person, or did that person listen to what you're saying and maybe put it in their own words? Like, was this the only way to address the issue, right? Obviously it wasn't, because someone else in the room handled it very differently. So taking all of those observations to the letters of Paul, it's like, theologians biblical scholars and theologians love to like carry on about that phrase, pistis Christou, right? The faith of Christ, like hours of pages and pages, books and books on that. Like, that might not even been Paul's idea. We're getting into nitty gritty that doesn't even matter. But in general, right? So they were mostly Paul and 1 or 2 guys that were collaborating. And so in general, we see a pattern within Paul's genuine letters in terms of like the beat, the way it's written. And it's kind of heavy-handed, it's direct, it's telling people what to do and think. And but it's also just kind of, succinct-ish. Deutero-Paul, however, goes off on these like lovely poetic mystical fascination, yada yada yada. And
that's where we get the metaphysical Paul.
That's right. And Ephesians, the opening of Ephesians, the first chapter, verses 3 to 14, is 1 sentence, right? Like, that's a long freaking sentence. That you wouldn't ever see that in Paul, right? Okay, so we have.
What? Snap. What? I've never realized that. Like, I'm thinking through it in my head, and I'm like, dang, that is. And I love
you even know what that content is in your head. That's amazing.
Ephesians was my favorite Paul. Like, I was one of the 5-fold ministry type of folks, so I loved about the ascending and the descending and giving gifts unto men. It's like, oh yes, I like this Paul.
Wow,
it's weird.
It's my least favorite of the Paul. I've been asked to do a commentary on it more than once, and I'm like, wow, okay.
Oh man,
yeah. So we have style, right? We have style differences. We have even just the even what I just talked about, like that. He's more direct in the genuine, and the other is over here doing some nice stuff, actually more pastoral, really. So there's a reflection of a change in terms of who's at the helm there. They use certain terms differently, like consistently differently. Like Paul talks about archons, talks about the powers, and he's talking about the Roman government, right? Ephesians talks about the powers, and we're talking heavenly beings. things, right?
That's right. Yes.
Very different. And it's consistent.
Yes.
Romans, Corinthians, like he's not varying on that.
Wow.
He's got a very real life situation he's addressing. And they're doing the spiritualized version stuff, right?
Man.
So there's that, go ahead.
You're making me realize how much work I had to do as a pastor to harmonize stuff that was not harmonized. And that it seemed like that was like, because I'm like, yeah, like a lot of this stuff we could see like, oh, this is a contradiction, but the job was to make it not contradict.
Harmonize it.
That's right. That's right. Build that bridge of contemporization, man.
Oh, baby.
Oh, my goodness. That is like, because so many things become clear when you come on the other side, but it's sad because, and again, that was the thing that upset me. I didn't necessarily need the Bible to be true to remain a Christian. I didn't need God to be real to remain a Christian. I really didn't. I just needed the people to be sincere.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
Like, that's like if the people would have been sincere and say, no, like, we don't actually believe in a God. We don't actually believe in we don't believe this is the word of a God. This is a preservation of history of some people, and we really like the stories in it. And so we use it to pull motivation.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. That's what I felt it was the whole time anyway. And I was waiting for somebody to tell me that. Yes. I would have been so cool. Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, and there are some communities that see it that way. Christian
there are,
communities.
yes.
There are.
Yes.
They're not as prevalent, but there are some. So anyway, yeah.
They are. Oh, I love it. I love it. That is that. Oh man. That's again, when someone knows what they're talking about because they're passionate about the information, it's going to pull conversation. These are just list of questions, and it's pulling such rich conversation out of this, and I'm overflowing.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yes.
Go ahead. I will just say one other thing about like the difference in language and I'm not addressing the question specifically, but just we do see a shift in terms of gifting according to the genuine Paul versus gifts or roles, gifts and roles in the Deuteropaul. Genuine Paul is, one body, one people, dude.
That's
right? Like there's no, I asked my online Newer Testament students, so where is the gendered, like which roles are men and women in the genuine Paul? And I get students really frustrated with me. They're like, I don't see it. Is this a trick question? Paul doesn't talk about gendered roles. And I'm like, no, that's the point. It's just that most people don't realize that, right? Like they think it's all the Deutero-Paul stuff. They don't realize that genuine Paul says, use your gifts, right? Like he doesn't say, these are the women's gifts for women's ministries.
Wow.
Paul talks about some people have the gift of teaching. Go teach. Some people have the gift of this. Some people have right? He doesn't say men have this gift. He says, right? And we'd see a shift. So there's a shift from this, in relatively egalitarian kind of thing or equality between men and women in this space thing happening in the genuine Paul. And it's radically undermined and pulled apart in the Deutero-Paul. So that's a shift. And that's important to note. And yes, that is very difficult. It's not hard to harmonize if you just ignore the one you don't want to.
That's right. That's right.
And that's what most people do. They just don't even realize that the genuine Paul says these things, right?
Well, we just changed the context and say, well, he was talking to a specific group here. He was talking to the whole body here and just a few people here. And I'm like, wait a minute. Now, Lieutenant Dan, that's amazing. Because, I am seeing like, it's making me like, I haven't thought of myself as a young preacher in a long time. Okay. And so I'm going back and just kind of sitting back in some of those days and being able to read and saying, okay, now wait a minute. This is clearly Paul contradicting himself here. And asking myself now, even though I know the answer, but still kind of sitting in it, why wouldn't I even allow myself to consider that as a hypothesis at that
That's point? Right.
Yeah. That these could be written by two different groups of people or two different people. That's a valid hypothesis at that moment. It's rational, it's reasonable. Others could exist, but that's the one that would have not come to my mind at all. But when you like calling out the differences between Paul in Corinthians and Paul in Ephesians, and just me thinking back through that now in real time, It's like, and do you know how hard I worked to reconcile 1 Corinthians chapter 12 to Ephesians chapter 5? Like, that was like,
You
oh
did
my
that
goodness.
like
Yeah,
very
oh,
directly. You actually did
yes,
that. Oh my
yes.
word. How did you do that?
Oh man, it was.
What
I was like, I had Paul pegged as like this guru of organization.
Okay.
Which actually, this is what ended up getting me into sociology. I wanted to get into industrial organizational psychology
Interesting.
after years of trying to unpack what the hell was going on with Paul.
That is
but
really fascinating.
I turned it all into a hierarchy of different gifts. That 1 Corinthians 12 are gifts that the everyday believer has, but
Right.
these in Ephesians 5 are the Christ gifts. See, the everyday believer gets from the Spirit, the pneuma. They get those from the pneuma, the infilling of God. But Christ gives these governmental gifts, which is why they, like I had this, like, oh my goodness, I was out on a deep end.
You were working it. Yeah.
Like, oh, it was bad. Like, and that's when I knew, though, like, I'm having to make all of this up. Like, I'm not pulling this. This is eisegesis. None of this is exegetical. I'm having to make things fit into places because it doesn't make sense. And like, and at the end of the day, that's when that certainty issue that I have started to really nitpick, because like, so how can you be certain that this was actually written by anybody named Peter, Paul, or anything? And then that's when I said, oh, let me go study the historicity. Let me go study the authoricity of the Gospels and the epistles. And holy shit, when it's like, it's not a secret. When I found out that it's not a secret that the Gospels are anonymous, I'm like, then wait a minute. Hold up. Like,
why haven't I heard it before then?
Yes. What? Like, what? No, we preached they were eyewitness accounts. Like, it's up until I was probably in my up until I was mid-20s, I believed that Matthew wrote Matthew, Mark wrote Mark, Luke wrote. At the very least, their disciples recorded it from them when they was old, like Rose in Titanic. You know what I'm saying? And they just dropping off jewels and shit. That's how I thought it was going. And then I'm like, no, what? This is just public information? Yeah. Like, this is...
Yeah. Why are they holding... why are they withholding it? Why did they withhold it? Yes. That's the question, right? Over and over. Yeah.
Oh, it broke my heart. It broke my heart. I felt like a fool. I felt like a fool.
Yes, like, that's it. That's part of it, right? When people start, as adults or even like late teens and undergraduate courses, they're like, why did they not give me this adult version? Why did no one tell me this? And it feels like you've been duped. For many people, not for everyone, but for many people, like, it wouldn't have been hard to give you the real story. It just would have changed the control, or would have changed the narrative. Just changed.
That's right. That's right. Oh, I love this. Damn it, I love this. Dr. Bird, you are a treat, man. Okay. All right. Okay. I got some more questions for you.
Okay.
Ooh, and I like this one. How does the treatment of church offices, bishops, deacons, elders, and the pastorals reflect a post-Pauline ecclesial hierarchy? And what might that say about the community's changing needs? Now, as a pastor, that was something I struggled with because, especially the early years, because my assumption in the early years is that everything I need to run a church is in the Bible. Boy, was I wrong.
Wow.
Because when it comes to actually running a church, the Bible is very, very quiet on that. Other than dropping a few titles here or there, that's all you can really pull.
Right.
So what is going on in these Pauline epistles with these different titles? Again, we see Ephesians, he's gone. This Deutero Paul has given us apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, and Paul has sometimes given us bishops and elders and overseers, presbyters. What is this actually building? What are they doing here? Is this the church? Is this the evolution of the church as we see today, or is there something else going on there?
Yeah. So, if you hear a cat in the background, she's fine. She's just she probably won't let you see her because she's skittish, but she's okay. I know, and she's my sweet little aunt, named after the Egyptian Hang on.
Yes.
Nope, the Egyptian
The
comes
god
up.
of
Yeah.
darkness.
Yes. My little most people don't know that part.
Yes.
Genuine Paul, I'd just like to posit that he was doing a thing, and he was traveling throughout the empire to a certain extent, bringing this new vision of a way to talk about things, a way to bring people who were considered not a part of the covenant into the covenant, and the language he used to do that appealed to who they already were. So it was a pretty effective way to get people to consider joining this thing. And Paul was some sort of apocalyptic vision I don't know or care about, but that I think was a part of it for him. But regardless, it was popular and it worked because the ideas were already out there and he pulled them together. So you get this, what starts off rather slowly, but it's spread around the empire. And there aren't things connecting the communities because of the time and the place.
Yeah.
But there is a need for a connecting of the communities, which we see predating Paul, right? Really powerful example with the Dionysus cult and how they were perceived. The members of the Dionysian cult throughout the empire were perceived as perhaps a second state because they were well organized. So that was a threat to the empire. They passed legislation, to undermine, to call them seditious. So we see this development, right? Paul is planting churches. It's the only time I like to think about church planting is what Paul did, not what people do today. But right, he just dropped into these locations and he threw these ideas together that made sense to people. And so slowly, small, right? And it took a couple hundred years before this caught on. But we start to see it within a few decades that people want organization. People don't start this kind of thing with organization in mind because you don't know what it's going to look like. Right. So he wasn't talking about leadership roles initially. That isn't a part of what he's doing. What is he doing? He's addressing questions that come up, and leadership roles are not on the table yet. So that's why you don't see leadership roles talked about until the end of the first century, because there wasn't a need for that to be talked about yet. But I think that there's a really important shift. And that is when Paul talks about these communities as not being dualistic, we're not about Jew and Gentile. We're not, the slave and free labels and realities that we live in don't apply here. And the concept of male and female, they don't apply here. That's one snippet, one verse out of one letter. A lot of people like to make a big deal out of that, but I think there's an important nugget in there, because if you are talking to people who are meeting within homes and you're telling them that there's a time and place when that home space does not work according to the typical home hierarchy, right? The home, the paterfamilias, the household code, right? There's a time in the week when we're not going to live according to our typical roles as slave and master. That's powerful. It invites women and enslaved peoples to like pay attention, and that can make it really popular. That's the predominant. That's the most. That's the large portion of the population, right?
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is seen as seditious or subversive, and you've got to shift that around. So there becomes a need to get rid of that space that was free. It was a space that a moment in time of some sort of freedom for people. You got to shut that shit down, and we got to get it back to orderly. So the church started meeting in homes, rebelling against the home structure, and then people in Paul's name come along and put that structure back onto it, or onto it for the first time. Does that make sense? So that's how I see it. That's how I see the language in the Deutero that uses household code roles, right? Yeah. That's only in the Deutero. You have this imposition of slaves behaving
Oh my
Masters, treat your
goodness.
slaves well. Women submit, and the enslaved peoples and the women have the most content directed to them. The group of the people who are most unwieldy if they get out of control. Right?
Wow. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a reason that the segment in Colossians to
Yes.
the enslaved peoples is the longest section. There's a reason for that.
Man, that makes sense.
Right?
That's wow. Okay,
Yeah.
see, and that's what I love about this, because again, this real time for me, I'm thinking back through a lot of this stuff, and I guess it's clear to me, or it's been becoming increasingly clear to me, that oh yeah, this is how movements work. Like just hearing you describe this, I've studied the Nation of Islam, which is identity-based movement. Its history is very, very, very similar.
Yes.
I think many of us know the history of Mormonism, which Paul sounds like he could have been the first, guy who, I forgot, what is the guy's name who started Mormonism? I always forget his name. There
Joseph
he is.
Smith.
Paul was Joseph Smith. I always want to go to Brigham Young. Brigham is the other guy.
Yes.
But ultimately, like, and just to kind of give a little caveat, that that interest didn't come from a desire for studying histories or studying organizations. It came from studying church splits. It started there. I was very curious at the phenomenon of church splits, because when I was coming up as a young minister, I witnessed a few churches split, saw the damage that it left behind, saw the new formation of the new types of movements, and I wanted to know what was kind of at work. What are the mechanics here? What's really going down? And then that eventually led me to start wanting to study movements, because we've had new Christian denominations even within the past 20 years. The Full Gospel Baptist denomination is one of the newer ones. And I watched how it kind of started. And so I got interested in stuff like Kojic, the Pentecostal movement, and specifically the Pentecostal movement. Now that I'm there, going back to, I used to know all of these people's names and I can't remember them now. Seymour, there was a William Seymour guy. And then there was the other guy who was the, but they were there. But these, these stories kind of start off in these legendary figures and things of that nature. But the aspect of harping on this unifying message, a message that seems to destabilize the main power source and pull it, like, it's like, dang, this is political subterfuge or something like that. Subversion, there it is.
Yeah.
Oh, or a sedition, like you said. It's
but it's also highly ironic, right? That the group that wants to be, in terms of Christianity, right, that claims to be one, is the most splintered, religious tradition on the planet.
Well, that was one of the thoughts I had when I first started doing. I used to do this thing called Bible study with an ex-pastor. I got to get back to it, but we started in the book of Genesis, and I said, you know what? I'm now starting to realize, from the first dang book, it's division all the way down. Like, that's this whole story. This whole story is Adam and Eve get divided against each other, because then Adam's snitching on Eve.
Yes.
And then they get divided from the garden. And then their children get divided from each other. And then almost every story of the patriarch, no, not almost, every story of the patriarch, until we get to Joseph, is a story of division against the siblings.
Yep.
And it's division. And then by the time you get into actual Israel's story, they get to be a unified kingdom for under 3 people.
Yeah.
And then after that,
not
division.
Long. That's right. Not long.
Yeah, it was not great. Not
great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Us and them.
Oh man. All right, let's see here. Yeah, this is actually giving me a lot to go back and chew on with Paul.
Good.
And some of this stuff has made me think, like, oh, I would have been a much better revivalist if I knew some of this stuff about because this is perfect. I was already killing the game, harmonizing 1 Corinthians 12 with Ephesians 5. But if I would have had this extra insight back then, oh my goodness, those people would have thought I was so deep. Oh, and that's really all it took for that crowd. You just, as long as you sound deep and you wave your hand and people feel chills, you got the power. That's you got the power. And I will say, I don't talk about it often, but I was a revivalist for a while in the early part of my ministry. I love the laying on in hands stuff.
Sure.
I stopped as I got older. I think it was around maybe 24 when I said, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't actually know what's happening. And I don't want to be responsible for someone coming in and now thinking God doesn't love them because they didn't get healed or they didn't feel something. And so it felt a little too sensational for me. And I was like, if God is going to heal somebody, he just needs to do it. And then we'll praise him for it and we'll give him all the glory. But I'm no longer going to announce it. I'm no longer going to set up our services that way. So
good for you.
I don't want anything to do with it. Well, I tell people my entire faith was a deconstruction journey. When I was a child, I had read the Bible and I was like, oh, this is like Hercules. You know, that's what I felt.
You just immediately went there. That's impressive.
I think you get to like, it's either in chapter 6 or chapter 11 where it reads and it says like, and these were the great men of legend. Some Bibles take great men of renown. And I'm like, well, I know what that means. Like, you know, these are legendary figures.
That's right.
So I was kind of convinced. And in my family, they were Baptist and they were African Methodist Episcopal. They were National Baptist and African Methodist Episcopal. Those churches were boring as fuck. And so I was convinced that these people don't believe in a God. Like not a God that did all this stuff in the Bible. They don't think that guy's here. Like, you know,
interesting.
And so like, but my mom, who was a drug addict, got delivered in a Pentecostal service. So this was my first time seeing people who behaved like they believed this. In the Baptist church, these people didn't behave like they believed this to me from that child mind. Like, if you believe this extraordinary thing, I think you'd be doing extraordinary things. So these Pentecostals, they believed this extraordinary stuff and they up there dancing and running around and saying it's the spirit that's moving it. And then they got my mama throwing up in a bucket. And so it looks like superpowers to me. And I was like, man, if God can save that heifer, this must be somebody good. And so I signed up to work for God, knowing then, like, I didn't understand, but he saved my mama, you know, and if he saved my mama, I'll serve him. And I don't understand it. This still feels like bullshit to me, but they're telling me that if I just take it on faith, he will eventually show me who he is and he'll show me the understanding. And so I spent nearly 2 decades doing all of it on faith. And I like even when I lay hands on people, I'd be like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing this, but this is what the other preachers do. So we're gonna see what's gonna happen. And then people would fall out, and I was like, okay, obviously that was the right button to press. All right, let's do it again. Let's run that back.
Wow, that is amazing. Wow.
And the whole time in my mind, I'm still not sure if I'm still trying to understand it, right? But by the time I got my first degree, I started getting a language to understand some of the things. And it wasn't even always in my deep classes. One of them was drama 101, because we talked about Dionysus and dithyrambs. And I was like, oh, this looks way too familiar. This is yikes. And then the other thing in drama was the suspension of disbelief. When I was introduced to that concept, because what I had been calling living by faith was actually me suspending my disbelief. And finally having that language for it, it was just like, oh, yeah, I think I want to stop doing that. And that's probably costing me a lot. It's okay to believe that Superman can fly when I'm not dependent on him to pay my bills.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it works. It does something for people to have this Superman. It's a nice little escape.
Yes.
It's a nice something. The things in the world that are scary.
Yep. Oh, I love this. Okay. All right. So, I got one on gender and ministry.
Okay.
In what ways do instruction about women's role, which we kind of got in this a little bit, about women's roles differ? Did I write this right? In what ways do instructions about women's roles differ between the undisputed epistles, where women co-labor openly, and the pastorals, were qualifications for? So we did kind of hit this a little bit. For overseers, emphasize that male leadership, so much so where you got to be the husband of one wife by the time we get there. Like, it gets really specific.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. And I think another one of your questions brought up specifically, I'm looking around for, hang on. I am the thing about Paul, another thing that I never knew until I was in graduate school looking at it, right? is, well, Paul doesn't talk, the genuine Paul, first of all, doesn't actually talk about roles in general, right? Like he doesn't, Paul talks about gifts, and he doesn't talk about roles, or
That is so
there are
good.
handful, yeah, well, and there are a handful of times
Dang,
that
like,
Paul uses the
you're
word
making me like
diakonos.
real Paul. I'm
I
starting to like
know.
real Paul.
It's yeah, it gets tricky, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. He does use the word diakonos a handful of times, which is a term people tend to translate as minister, but he uses it to talk about Jesus as like servant or slave or something, or minister.
Oh,
Like it's hard
yes.
to know how he means it. He also uses it to refer to himself. But the one that I think you're well familiar with, in Romans chapter 16, excuse me, the first verse, I commend to you our sister Phoebe,
Phoebe.
a
Yes.
diakonos of the church of Cenchrea, so that you may welcome her in the Lord, as is fitting for the saints, and help her in whatever she may require from you. For she has been a benefactor of many, and of myself as well. So people get caught up in, which way do we translate diakonos here? Is she the head of a church in Cenchrea? Most likely, right? Yep. She is also a benefactor. And who else has he talked about as a benefactor? I don't think anyone else. So he obviously had them, if he did as much traveling as we're told. I don't know if he did half as much as we're told, right? But
Yeah.
I think, right, it's reasonable to say maybe he did some, but not as much as we're told. But
Yes.
She's been a benefactor. So she's money bags. She's a bossy woman. When she tells you to do something, she says to jump, you say how high, right? Like
Yes.
this is Paul acknowledging a force in the communication, in the congregation, right?
Yep.
And he puts her first.
Man.
Like this chapter of Romans is the list. It's like this is his this is letter of reference. These are the people I know, right? These are the people in Rome that I know, or in the Rome community extended that I know. So I'm going to tell you all the power players that if I can name drop them, right, then you can trust me. That's what he's doing in this chapter, and he starts with Phoebe.
Oh my
Just
goodness.
period, right? Like I just think, let that sink in. She's the head of a church in Cenchrea, and Paul thinks she's powerful enough, or he's kissing her butt. Either way, she's worth commending, which he doesn't commend people, right? There are so many.
I mean, he don't even commend Peter.
He doesn't. Exactly. He does not commend, but he does it for Phoebe.
Wow.
Head of a church, Miss Moneybags.
That's amazing.
It's huge, actually, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And then, of course, he goes through the list of all these other people. And I know you know this, but like Prisca and Aquila. Well, Prisca's mentioned first. Who does that? Nobody. To this day. It's never Mrs. and Mr.
Nope. That's right. That is right.
It might be from time to time, but the exception proves the rule that I'm trying to point to, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
She's listed first. She's listed first. And then, of course, again, I know you know all this very well. They work with me in Christ. They risk their necks for my life. Like, this is a huge commendation. And then we also have the issue of Junia in verse 7, right?
Junia, yes.
Right. And how she's turned into a man in the early tradition, right?
I thought she was a man for a very long time.
Yes, exactly. And I got to tell you, Darante, that was, I think, for me in seminary, when someone told me that, I think that was the last gut punch for me.
Wow.
And I was done. I was,
Yep.
didn't know it in the moment, but I was done with this patriarchal shit,
Yep.
It felt like, you took a woman's work and life and labor and just erased it with adding an S. Sigma, are you kidding me? I was just done.
Oh my goodness. I've been referring to her as Junia for so long. I totally forgot that it was Junius. But yes, that's why. Oh, I forgot about that. I forgot the S. Yeah. But I found out about Junia, excuse me, around the same time I found out about Priscilla and Akia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing research because I never had a problem with women ministers or anything like that. Again, I came up Pentecostal when I got saved, though, and they were pretty free willing,
Yeah.
And then I from my readings of the Gospels and Acts at that time, women were highly involved. I mean, again, like apparently that's one thing Jesus and Paul had in common. They liked being close to women with money, because Jesus had, what was the name? He had the lady whose husband worked for Herod
in Luke chapter 8. Yes.
Yes, you know. But I'd always seen women highly highly involved in the Gospels, and then of course using the words of Acts where they'd say, pull back to the Old Testament, he's going to pour his spirits out on the old men and the young men and the daughters and all of that good stuff. And so I was like, oh yeah, God is just, he's working with everybody. I mean, that would make sense to me if God loves all of his children, that he wouldn't just be like, nah, the ones with boobs can't do anything. And then if that's the case, what do you do with the ones who are fat like me? Is there a special category for the men with boobs, or do we get like, yeah, I don't know. But it was very odd to me. So as I begin to gain more credibility in ministry, which is really more so popularity, people would want me to speak on different issues. And so one of them was the increasing rise of women in the pastoral role, and women using titles such as bishop or apostle or anything. And by this time in my ministry, I'm like, the titles don't matter anyways, guys. It's just, I don't get the point here. But I decided to do like a 3-week-long teaching on women leaders in the New Testament. And now just thinking about it, there's somebody I overlooked, because when I read her story, I don't actually read it as a story of leadership. And I think her name was Lydia, the seller of purple. Because something you just said made me think, oh, when her story is told, her name is said.
Yeah.
It's not just some woman. Her name is said. And that leads credence. So that's,
and she's important in the community. There's a reason he goes to her house. Yeah.
Man, like, I think I was just reading like, oh, she's just some random woman, you know?
Yeah, sure.
But it turns out, like, because technically, is that scene showing us her starting a church by the time she comes there?
The community,
because it seems to talk about her in that way. And just even as progressive as I was, I still didn't see her. I didn't see her as an important part of this story, even though her name is mentioned. I'm just treating it like, oh, they're just saying it just to make the narrative better. Yikes.
Understandable, though. Understandable, right? It's typical. Yes. Yeah, I mean, and yes, women are not always named. Yes, in these stories.
Except for when Sapphira and her husband got killed. They made sure to say her name. Didn't leave her out of that one.
Yeah, Miss Moneybags. Back in Luke, I was just going to refer to it. The Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons ago. Joanna, the wife of Herod's steward. Joanna. Yes, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them. So I refer to them as the sugar mamas of the disciples. Disciples.
Because that's pretty much how that goes. They didn't mention not one man that's funding them. I didn't
exactly.
Hear one, like other than Joanna getting it from her husband, but I don't think she's telling him.
I don't think exactly. I think you're right about that. And Susanna and many others. All of these women providing for them, bringing this to you. This is provided by.
Man. Now, that's one thing I will say I did enjoy about my latter years preaching. One of my mentors, his name was Dr. R.A. Vernon, and he had just finished his doctorate, and he was really excited. That was something he had challenged himself to do. And one of the things he decided to start doing after he got his doctorate was start platforming more women in his church. And he launched a whole series that almost everybody that was connected to him repeated in their church, including me. I did it at mine, where they were going to make Easter about the women. So for that year, all of us did an Easter series called She Saw Him First.
Nice.
And it was about the idea that it was the women who received him at the tomb first and saw him when he first came out, and are basically the first people who preached the gospel. And it was a really fun experience. Like I when we did it at our church, I reached out to as many women in the community as I could to get them involved in it. And to see how much they appreciated just that type of acknowledgement was amazing. And the funny thing is, it's not their story. It has nothing to do with their lives at all. But it's just like, if they know this is the story you take seriously, if you take the women seriously in that story, then maybe you'll take me seriously too.
That's right. That's
and
right.
that was a beautiful thing to be a part of. Now that I cannot lie. I love that. I miss stuff like that, to be honest. Oh, dang it. But you have given me some things to wrestle with Paul with that I've never seen before. Because I don't know. I do know. When I deconstructed, I had already got to that point. Hey, I don't believe any of this true anymore. So I just left the Bible alone for a long time after that.
Okay. Yeah.
But now I'm actually going back, doing more with the Bible. And now just knowing the difference between Deutero Paul and genuine Paul, I want to know more about this character now. Like this is fascinating for me because I had to harmonize Paul. So to me, Paul was the guy who absolutely did not view women as equal. When he's talking about, there's no more male and female, he's just talking about in the heavenly realm. In that way.
Yeah. No, that's not what he's doing.
It's like, no, this Deutero Paul is completely contradicting this genuine Paul. And so these are two separate theologies, and I want to follow that rabbit trail. Yes.
I have a comment though. So there's a really interesting issue in my book, Permission Granted, when the talk about Paul, I actually I've changed my mind on some of the stuff about Paul. So when I sell a copy of this now, I actually put an insert in it and say, "Dear reader, I have changed my mind about something." And this is an interesting moment for you as a reader to know that scholars do change their minds and yada, yada. And it's about Paul. So it's kind of important to a lot of people. But I'm, in the chapter is the part I'm wrestling with the 1 Corinthians 11, 2-16. Pretty sure you know what that was about, the head coverings and yada, yada.
Oh, yes.
Right. And then 1 Corinthians 14, 33-36, which is this, people are debating whether it's an interpolation, meaning something that was written in the margins of the letter that were written next time it was copied, were copied into the body of the letter. And at the time that I wrote this book, I was believing that it was an interpolation. So these ideas were like, what are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah. And they got put in. And the thing in 1 Corinthians 11 about head coverings and all that, like I was reading it as this diet, like going back and forth. Lots of people do that. And I and I just got to the end and I looked at verse 16 where it says, yeah, you know what? I don't have any ideas about this, and stop fighting. And so I just left it at that. Like Paul didn't actually really care. Stop bickering about things that don't matter. And then I had some scholars in my kind of collegial friendly scholars kind of tear me apart on that in a book. They actually tore apart the fact that I didn't see the misogyny in 1 Corinthians 11 that Paul was still holding up. Even though at the end he said,
that's good. Yes.
I don't really care. He still posited ideas that as part of what people are saying. And so he's still leaving space for that misogyny. And let me just if I can just really quickly follow that up. So what that, it was really awful to take that in print, like to see in print that nobody had actually asked me to talk about that with them before they published that. Pretty hard. But I also don't care, right? But what it pushed me to just be able to say to people was, consider the most progressive man you know. He probably has more sexist ideas within him than he's aware of. And he might have moments of beautiful feminist egalitarian stuff, right? Equality, empowerment of women, whatever, however you want to talk about that. But he still has sexist, misogynistic framing in his head that he has to contend with. And honestly, I got to that place and of feeling compassion for people like that because I knew my own issues growing up. I had I have sexist ideas pop into my head to this day because of my upbringing. I have racist ideas pop up in my head. To this day, right? So I do my best to only present
Come on.
the aware Jen, right? The aware in all these realms. and I do my best, but they sneak up every now and then. And so I think that Paul was deeply sexist, and that he put into letters lots of really like supportive things, but there's some other times he let sexist shit in because he couldn't help it, right?
Yeah.
So I think he was trying to be, empowering of women, but he can't help his upbringing. He can't help the years and years of the Jewish tradition he was steeped in that was heavily sexist. Absolutely. Right?
Oh, this is
and
good.
He can't help all the things. So
yeah.
So I want to say that there are a lot of really cool things in the genuine Paul that you can point to and say, this is freeing, this is liberating, or this is helpful. And it is side by side with some deeply problematic shit. And I think that's more honest too. That's who we are as people, right?
That is exactly who we are.
And that the Deutero Paul is more sexist. Sorry, I interrupted you on that.
No, you're good. Yeah. I mean, my first thought immediately went to Pilate, right? Because here's Jesus, and he's like, he obviously doesn't really care, but he's still going to sustain the system that's going to let this happen.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And that's kind of where my mind goes from a leadership perspective.
That's right. That's right.
Even though it's more drastic for Pilate, I could possibly see Paul as an aspiring leader who wants to run this movement, build this movement, trying to figure out what's the best way that I can introduce this without rocking the boat too much.
Acknowledge the things. And but that's good. Still not he still doesn't say that but that thinking is really needs to go. He doesn't do that, right? It's
like the founding fathers of this country. we can put them in a very similar place. Like, yes, everybody should be free, but some
except for the ones working for me in my backyard.
Yes. Yes.
I think it's really important to make those comparisons actually to more recent people, because they were more supposedly, right, because of the Enlightenment, right? They're a little bit more advanced, and they're still falling short, but they were doing some work, right?
Yeah.
But if that was them in the 18th century, right?
Oh my goodness.
Then why would we not do the same for people in the first century? When you read all these philosophers and all these people that Paul sounds a lot like, they're sexist. You better believe it, they are.
Oh my goodness.
Right? We take some elements, some grains of thought from them that are helpful, but they were also deeply racist. I think the label race applies in the first century as well, but people don't but anyway, but you know
how they go.
Right, I do.
I agree.
I just think, and I think it's more important back to the issue of certainty. I don't think he was one thing. I think he was human and complex. And I think when we want to say, well, Paul was this or Paul was that, I'm like, on a given day, sure. Right.
Yes. Oh, man. We just uncovered something major with this. Because now what we're talking, we realize when we're talking about these people, Paul, Peter, Jesus, Moses, that we're talking about people who have ultimately been deified in society. But what you just helped me realize is that what we're learning how to do is to humanize these people, is to give these characters, to put these characters back into the lens of humanity and to give that humanity. And it's ultimately just us treating it like we've treated every other historical, non-historical, pseudo-historical.
That's right.
Look, we treat it all this way, and we want to know the truth of it. Deifying it does rob it of its humanity. And that we're having to do the hard work to get past that, to go back and see these people as people. And then when we do that, we do see a much larger story that's not very unique from any of the other stories that we've seen, which to me is all the better. I think from a scientific perspective, if you will, if as you're traveling the universe, you find things that continue to bear out the things that you've seen before, it's a wonderful thing to see. So I know now when I go back to the Bible and I say, oh, this now looks like other ethnic history, political history that I've seen. Then I can actually appreciate it better and understand how it fits in the world without having to overinflate or underappreciate its existence.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh,
nicely said.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, it's I am people-centric, and that it took me a while to get it to those words, but that's just where I'm people-centric. So my relationship with the Bible, other than what it's been used to do, what people have, and I don't even want to say it's been used. Well, I mean, it has, but it's deeper than that for sure. But my relationship with it is this is a patchwork of human history that several humans have been a part of its creation, and then several millions, if not billions, have been impacted by it in not so positive ways and some positive ways.
Right.
And so at this moment, it's a part of our fabric. It's a part of the fabric of our existence. It's only good stewardship to know how to place it properly. And I think that's what we should be doing with all of our literature, with all of our art, because that's what it is. All of our history, it is our art. It's how we create our stories of ourselves. Even when those stories themselves aren't true, they communicate something that we desire to be true about ourselves.
Yes.
And from a sociological perspective, that's fascinating to me.
Agreed.
Oh man, see, like we get in some good conversations.
This is so fun. Yeah,
I love it. I'm gonna ask you one more question, just so I feel like I got through at least some of these. Let me ask you this: did you have a favorite out of any of these that you wanted to make sure we hit?
Yeah, hold on. I think I had, I guess probably down from the bottom. When you talk about the methodological and hermeneutical approaches, those questions.
Yes.
I liked those questions, and they partly because it's a different angle than what we have been talking about, I suppose.
Okay.
But
let's wrap up. You okay with wrapping up with both of them?
Sure. Yeah.
Yay. All right. So, y'all, I love this. So, what interpretive lenses, social, scientific, feminist, rhetorical, have you found most illuminating for reading Paul's instructions about women? Damn, that is a good question. I like it.
I pat myself on the back for that one.
I like that.
Well, and I might not apply it to understanding just women, but I will address your question, which is I have found. So let me just say, when I did doctoral work, I kind of backed into, didn't know there was such a thing as post-colonial studies. And I saw in the letter of First Peter this issue of the political realm, the standards of the political realm were being embodied in this letter. And I wanted to look at that because I thought that was actually kind of fascinating, because I never, as an undergrad, like prior to doctoral work, I didn't see the politics of any of this stuff, the New Testament writings or the communities themselves. And so I'm like, wait, they're adapting a political expectation within a letter that's written to church communities? Like, I want to look at that.
Yes. Yes.
And I didn't know that would come to me through post-colonial lenses, but it did. And it was very powerful to read all these post-colonial theorists, Homi Bhabha, all the guys, Edward Said. So that brought a whole layer to all of the Newer Testament for me. And then what I had been dabbling with, but it took a while to kind of I was pretty feminist as a human in general, but feminist within theology, that took me some time. And so,
whoa.
You know?
You just got to say that one more time, because that hits so hard. That's such an accurate way to say that. That's good. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm shut up now. That was just good.
No.
That was good.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. I think it probably is something that a lot of people can relate to.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did I read a lot of womanist, feminist work in one particular class in seminary. It was a course I was afraid to take because I didn't want to learn about all these angry women. But but I thought I should learn about them so I'd understand them, and then I realized they were onto something.
Wow.
Yeah. So feminist lenses for looking at the Bible in general, super deeply important. And and in particular, as I just alluded to, I could see the injustices in these relationships with human beings. Like, you just treated me like I don't matter, but I came up with the idea 5 minutes ago. Like, that's real. Like, that I've lived it all, right? And so I could see it there.
Oh
But
man.
seeing it in the Bible, seeing it in my faith, that was freeing in a way, and deeply empowering in a way that I did not expect.
Wow. Man.
Giving me a voice in a way to speak to some of the origins, really, or some of the elements that have kept patriarchal standards in place, is what I see the biblical text doing to a large degree, right? So feminist lenses, post-colonial, seeing the political, but also the idea of that comes with materialist lenses. And I don't mean that just in the strict Karl Marx materialist, but I mean these ideas are read and read and read and read and studied and embodied, and these ideas become realized in our lives. That is important to me, and that is where I kind of dwell with all these other pieces of how I engage the Bible specifically, but I also engage, people in around me through these lenses too. But right. But okay, biblical text. Let's talk about this. This feminine, the context is historical criticism is deeply important. But for me, what is important to me is bringing the awareness of the language that Paul is using, what is being assumed to be true about God, right? What is, and then looking at how all these different ideas take root in people's lives, so that at the end of the day, there are many things about Paul's writings that I do want to raise I think are red flags, right?
Yes.
He believed, in writing at least, he endorsed a wrathful God.
Yeah.
That's problematic for me.
Yes.
Right? In writing, he believed in very dualistic categories for humanity. And that's been very detrimental, I think, to the church.
100%.
Right? So, in writing, he's pretty narcissistic. He's got some issues.
Very much so. Unapologetically, even.
Yes, exactly. Very proudly. Yeah. So that's, that's where I am actually in the work I'm doing right now with Paul and Paul's letters, is I'm trying to help highlight for people these elements. He was actually anti-Judaic in some of the genuine Paul.
Yeah.
Which is he was a Jewish man to his death. There's no way, all kinds of things to say about Paul, I guess. But so, I think that to address the question, how do these things help me think about women specifically? I mean, I think they help me to do kind of this historical work that you've been talking about, right?
Yeah.
And to see that, throughout, the worship of the great mother, Demeter, call her what you want to, Sybil, Demeter, whatever, whoever she was, right? She goes back to 8,000 BCE at least, right? So
yes, indeed.
We've got the concept of women as divine very nicely in place long before this, So when you come in and your language eliminates women from the realm of the divine, right? Like there's just going to be a lot to unpack there. So
yeah. And I mean, and it has consequences that we've been living out for a very long time. And,
right.
I can remember coming to terms with some of those consequences myself, wrestling with, because you mentioned something earlier that was so true, and I hope no one missed it. And that is, like we all still have these things in ourselves that we have to be aware of. And I know that's something I've been increasingly aware of, is my own sexism, my own racism, my own nationalism, my own anything that I use to categorize other people differently than myself, and to give myself different access to something than I would give them, or anything that gives me the right to have an opinion about somebody, even though I don't know shit about it. I try to watch those things. And it's but it was a journey, and so like I think the thing that pretty much triggered us being able to do our first meeting was when I shared the story on Icopod's channel about my wife. And that is when we got together, I made it very clear to her that I don't do the submission thing. You're not going to be beneath me. Number one, that's not even attractive to me. That's a lot of hard ass work to have to take care of another adult. So we're going to be equals. Yep. Because I see you as capable of being equal. And I know you see yourself that, but if we continue to play that game, then we're going to pass that down to our children. And the thing that I noticed was that much of even the women in my own family, they didn't necessarily need men to tell them what to do because their mothers had already been trained to do it. And so I wanted to make sure that I broke that cycle with my daughters, that you get to see something different and decide who you want to be. And it's hard because you as a father, your daughter and my daughters are both in their teens now. They go to the store, they want to buy stuff, and I'm like, hey, whoa, what is that? Why are you wanting to buy that? Like, no, not that. Come on now, like, come on, son, let's go to the winter clothes rack. Let's get something with some sleeves on it.
The male gaze is real.
Yes, and then I have to always confront that self within myself, and I give myself grace. I have those conversations with my kids, and I say, hey, this is how daddy reacts to things. But and I always give myself the freedom to be like, yeah, you're their parent, not their owner. They're not your property. You're not their lord and master. That's not how this works. And at the end of the day, you want to be able to trust their decisions, and you want them to be able to learn how they want to navigate in life. You want them to feel that autonomy. You want them to feel like they are their authentic selves. And so I always try to wrestle with myself on that. And it's a beautiful journey. I think it makes me a better parent. I think it makes me a better spouse. I hope it makes me a better friend, because at the end of the day, the biggest lesson that I've learned, and this is a lesson I had to learn for myself first, is nobody knows how to treat me without knowing me. So I don't know how to treat anybody without knowing them. And so I don't get to impose my ways of the world, my values, my perspectives, what I think is appropriate on anybody else. They've been shaped by entirely different circumstances and have entirely different comfort zones and comfort levels. And I can't just pretend like I don't know that. I do know that. And so I should treat people like I know that. And that's to me, it's number one, it keeps me out of people's business, which gives me a lot more time to work on my own shit.
Isn't it relief? Yeah.
Yes. Oh, man. Oh, snap.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Dr. Bird, this has been absolutely exceptional today.
It's been so fun. Thank you.
Yes. I'm going to pull myself off the screen, number one, to wipe the tears and the sweat off of my face, but also to allow you to just share anything that you got going on. You've already been able to share with us a little bit about your work. So I'm going to give you the stage, and I'll be watching for the clue to bring myself back on.
Okay.
I should have did this before I said that, so I'd be ready.
That's okay. No worries. It's all good. Thank you. Well, if you're interested in following me in any kind of way, the easiest way to get to my socials is to go to my website, which is jennifergracebird.com. And you'll see the icons to go to YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I do a regular story time where I basically just read through biblical stories or passages, and I give it my full on unfiltered commentary. And I do that live and have a really great time with that. But I also have a series called Does the Bible Tell You So? And so where I talk about, topics, subjects that people want to know. Does the Bible actually say that you can't have sex before marriage or whatever? So I have two different playlists there. And you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok, though I don't put a whole lot of content there. But I also have, as I held this up earlier, I have a book that is called Permission Granted, Take the Bible into Your Own Hands, which is it's a culmination of the most important conversations that I had in, several dozen intro courses to the two primary testaments. What was most helpful for people to learn about and then internalize and work through for themselves about the Bible. So that's what this book is, and it's available in audio as well as in paperback. And then my most recent book is called Marriage in the Bible, What Do the Texts Say? And that's where the Icopod connection came here for me with you. And I think it's the most important thing I'll do in my lifetime is that book, because It's not about convincing anyone of a particular stance on marriage in terms of marriage equality. I happen to affirm marriage equality, but my work as a scholar is about what's going on in the texts that people turn to justify this concept of biblical marriage, or what are the texts actually saying about marriage, the texts that do actually influence the way people think, even if it's not directly there. It doesn't, people don't necessarily turn to these stories, but they're actually informing the way people think about this relationship we call marriage. It's a really important book, in my mind. And now I'm moving on to do some work on Paul, which is looking at all these things that I wish people knew about Paul, right? I wish people knew that, he drew upon other religious traditions. I wish people knew these things about his language. So that's the work I'm up to. And yeah, so happy to be here with you today, talking about some of that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be with me again. This was an excellent conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try to do it again just because
Okay.
it's healthy. It's helpful for me. And I'll just kind of add to this. What I really enjoy about talking with you is that you could easily just stay within the confines of the text itself and the analysis of the text, but you do an excellent job of making this fit within the cultural narrative that it existed within.
Thank you.
And the day that it existed within, which I find to be absolutely, I mean, that was the thing that I was robbed of as a pastor, as a Pentecostal pastor, because I don't want to insinuate that all pastors have that type of relationship. Pentecostals are a lot more loose. We don't require seminary or none of that, As a matter of fact, we demonize it. But so yes.
Right.
But so hearing someone talk about, to be able to create these conversations and talk about how they impacted people, how these ideas at the time impacted people, that to me, that's where the most important part is at. Because then that also helps us understand why it impacts us, why it's having the impacts it does today, which I think the sooner we all catch that, the better. So thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to drop you into the back while I do these little closeout things, which I don't have a lot. But again, everybody show Dr. Bird some love. I do have the link to her website in the description, so please check it out. All right, y'all. Did y'all love this? I know y'all did, because I did. And if I loved it, y'all had to love it. I was sitting up here grinning like a kid the whole time. But I do that. Like that's what good conversation does. And as you know, I am a champion of community as a service, and to me, conversation, that's the basic building blocks of tools, of community rather, which also just so happens to be the basic building block of learning. We learn so much when we're able to engage in conversations, which is why I love this. We did have a super chat today, so I do want to, oh man, Deconstruction Zone, much love from you. $4.99, thank you so much. He said, and I wish I would have kept Dr. Bird on for this one, because this is good. Emperor Julian accused the church of preying on women and slaves, and Julian against the Galileans. Dude was savage. Ooh, this is very interesting. I'm going to have to go check that one out. Thank you, Deconstruction Zone. Love you so much. Appreciate you for your support. And of course, we've been recognizing our top fans for the past few weeks. If you are still here and you're one of our top fans for today, which means you were commenting and doing stuff, you can get a code to get any of the free digital guides off of Windows Shop for free. This is a benefit that some of my patrons already get. Patrons at certain levels, they can get our digital guides unlimited for free because they're patrons at certain levels. But for our top fans, we decided that we'll start doing this. So that's going to be Mike Balkansky. You're number one. So make sure to email me, dl@dldd.us, and I'll make sure you get your free code. TMAS9044. You came in at number 2. Make sure to email me. And then Beam Me Up Bob. I'm glad I took my time reading that because I was about to mess that the fuck up and then it wouldn't have been as funny. And now I like it. Beam Me Up Bob. That's going to be stuck in my head now, Bob. And I'm almost sure that your name isn't Bob, but I like it. But yes, all 3 of you, you're our top fans. And this is just a small way that we want to say thank you for engaging with our content, and a way of putting something in your hands that can help you have deeper conversations or deeper study with yourself or deeper conversations with other groups. So if you want to redeem your code to get a free digital guide, and you can get any digital guide of your choice from Windows Shop, email your boy DL@dl Discover, learn, develop, do. All right. So thank you all for sharing your time with us this weekend. Make sure you share this video with someone else so that they might discover, learn, and even do something new. Be sure to come back and leave your comments on today's conversation. And of course, if you would like to financially support this audacious work, we do have our links in the descriptions. We also have a new patron level for those of you who want to support the traveling efforts. And then, of course, we have the QR codes in our outro. And so you can use all of them at your disposal. I love you all so much, man. Until next time, I'll see y'all all next weekend. Until next time, keep rising.